Greetings, folks. AnIolairGhorm here with a replay in the new Tier 6 U.S. Navy light cruiser, the USS Dallas. We are in a domination match here on New Dawn. Each team brings 3 battleships, 7 cruisers, and 2 destroyers to the match. And my ship build and commander skills are pretty typical for a cruiser at this tier. The 2 things I'll point out are that first, I have the propulsion modification 2 for the slot 4 upgrade, and I'll cover here in a moment why that is. And secondly is that I have the IFHE, or inertia fuse high explosive skill, for my commander. And I think most have recognized that skill is essentially a necessity for any light cruisers that fire HE, certainly at the upper tiers, tier 8 and higher, but even among mid-tier cruisers, it's been demonstrated to offer a lot of much better results in terms of alpha damage and so on. So I have to admit that I had some apprehension about restarting the U.S. Navy cruiser line after the split. This is partly because I'm not a big fan of the U.S. Navy cruiser play style. I had made it all the way to the Des Moines. In fact, the only U.S. Navy cruiser that I retained other than the Des Moines was the Tier 6 Cleveland prior to the split. And then I had heard mixed reviews and even negative reviews regarding the Cleveland at Tier 8, especially when it gets up-tiered. And so I had some apprehension about restarting this line. But I have to say that I've really enjoyed the gameplay with the Dallas, and I think it has a lot going for it. So the first is that it has the U.S. Navy cruiser shell arcs, and that's a double-edged sword. That gives you, first, the upside is that it gives you flexibility on being able to fire over terrain with greater ease than many of its counterparts in other nations. And we'll get several examples of that during this game, including this Colorado that I'll start firing on here in a moment. The downside to those arcs, as I think most people know, is that it can make it quite difficult to hit maneuverable targets at medium and long ranges, destroyers for sure, even many cruisers. But when firing on larger, slower, and less maneuverable targets like this Colorado and battleships, the arcs are less concerning. Secondly, the alpha damage for both the HE and AP is quite good. Again, for the HE, I think it's important to have the IFHE skill to give you better flexibility on what armor schemes you can penetrate or armor thicknesses you can penetrate. Obviously, you lose fire chance by taking that skill, but you can offset it to a significant degree with the demolition expert skill, which I do have, as well as taking signals if you choose. The AP is also quite strong, especially against other cruisers, and we'll have a few examples of that during this game. And because it's U.S. Navy, it does benefit from favorable bounce angles on the AP shells. The concealment on the Dallas is quite good. The old Tier 6 USS Cleveland, I believe, had a best concealment of 11.3 or 11.4 kilometers. The Dallas can get down to 10.1. That gives you, I think, a great deal more flexibility on being able to approach objectives while under concealment. And it also allows you to get into concealment more readily if needed. The range, in fact, on the Dallas, which is 14.3, I believe is also the same as what the old Tier 6 Cleveland had. So getting an additional kilometer or more than a kilometer of concealment benefit over the old Cleveland, I think has a lot of benefits. The maneuverability on the ship is quite good. In fact, I'm comfortable enough with the base rudder shift on the B hull that instead of taking steering gears modification 2, I took the propulsion modification 2. That gives me some better flexibility when sort of accelerating and decelerating, which is very common for U.S. Navy cruisers, since they do leverage the terrain a great deal to be able to fire over it. And being able to sort of creep forward and back up regularly is a common practice. The turret traverse on the USS Dallas is quite good. It's 22.5 seconds for 180 degrees. That is substantially better than what the 8-second reloading guns had on the old Tier 6 Cleveland. I think that's important for cruisers, which obviously do a lot of maneuvering to avoid incoming shells. And if you have slower turret traverse, it can be very aggravating trying to keep your turrets on a target while also maneuvering to avoid incoming fire. So I really appreciate having the faster turret traverse. The last thing I would point out is that I think Wargaming has one of the traits that it's given the U.S. Navy cruisers is it's given it a lot of flexibility on the consumables. So the U.S. Navy, one of the deficiencies, in my opinion, that it has is that after the Omaha, there are no torpedoes on any of the U.S. Navy cruisers. And that can have a lot of challenges, or that can be very challenging at times, and reduce some flexibility that you may have in terms of your offensive capability. But in return, the U.S. Navy cruisers have generally at least one more consumable than a lot of their counterparts tier for tier. So in this case, for the Dallas, you have, in addition to the damage control party, which all ships have, you have 3 consumables, whereas the old Cleveland only had 2. So you don't have to trade off whether you get defensive fire or hydroacoustic search. You get both, and you get the plane. And here, when I'm firing on this broadside Alba, we're seeing the example of the strength of the AP shells. In this next salvo, I'm going to finish off the Alba with a double Citadel. So the AP shells, again, on the U.S. Navy cruisers are very good. And the shell ballistics are even slower with the AP than the HE. So hitting targets at farther distance can be a little more difficult. But when you do hit, they can cause some serious damage. The one thing that so I coming back to the consumables, I think having the additional consumables gives it a lot of flexibility, which is really nice. The ship itself is not very tanky, so the old Cleveland Tier 6 was generally perceived as among the tankier cruisers, and there again we see another good example of the strength of the U.S. Navy AP shells when I basically one-shot the Kirov. But this ship, in my opinion, compared to the old Tier 6 Cleveland, is not nearly as tanky. It's more easily citadeled. It's not as easily citadeled as, let's say, a Nuremberg or the Leander, but compared to the old Cleveland, I don't think it is as tanky. It certainly has fewer hit points than the old Cleveland. It's 28,300, I believe, which is a little bit better than the Nuremberg and the Leander. But the Leander at least has the advantage that it has a repair party consumable, whereas the Dallas doesn't have that benefit. The last thing I would point out here is the AA, or the anti-air on the Dallas, is serviceable. It works. Again, the only AA improvement that I've put on the ship is I've taken the AA modification 2 for the upgrade. I didn't invest any skills yet into AA for the commander. In fact, I'm not sure that I will as I move this ship up the line, as the AA will gradually continue to improve. But the AA is serviceable, and compared to the old Tier 6 USS Cleveland, which I think for many people is bordered on being overpowered with regard to AA, this ship cannot compare, but it does work okay. Now, coming back to the game, we're 9 minutes in, and the first 2 minutes we're just getting into position, so it's essentially been 7 minutes of action, and I've already racked up over 100,000 in damage, including a couple of very strong salvos on opposing cruisers, and I've gotten a few fires now. So the ship is quite capable. In fact, here, for the rest of the match, my goal will be to basically keep this King George lit up. First I use my plane to keep him spotted, and then he puts his plane up to spot me, but I'm going to use my defensive fire to shoot it down. So this is going to exemplify, some of the consumable flexibility. But then after he shoots down my airplane, and we lose visibility on here in a moment, I will activate hydroacoustic search and keep him lit up. And I will deliberately not come out to be attacked by him. Since, I mean, he's firing HE as far as I can tell, and I could probably survive another HE salvo from him. But in the event that he does end up firing AP, I don't want to, have the unpleasant discovery that he can take me out in one shot. So I'm just going to keep him lit up here while the Fiji, our allied Fiji in A, puts fire on him, and then the cruisers that are over on the 8 and 9 line are able to put fire on him as well. You'll notice that there is an allied Congo at Foxtrot 1 that he was AFK. And in fact, the opposition had an AFK ship as well, a Leander, that was sunk not too long ago. So yeah, altogether I've done over 110,000 in damage. I think the ship is quite strong, and if you're a good cruiser main, I think you'll enjoy the ship quite a bit, as I have. So in fact, this is the last match that I sail before getting to the Helena, and I'm really looking forward to playing that ship as well. So here we're just going to wrap up and finish off the last opponent. I've got AP loaded in case he comes around the corner, but fortunately our allies finish him off, and that ends the match. So yes, the USS Dallas, my overall impression is that it's a solid ship for Tier 6. Like I said, I'm looking forward to playing the Helena. I hope you have enjoyed watching this replay, and please add your comments below. And on that note, I hope to see you out there, and I wish you happy sailing.